Today, fellas, we are looking at Redrix Broadsword for like the 100th time. How many times have we reviewed this weapon? But how many times this weapon flip-flopped between being mediocre and a little better than mediocre? And then that's kind of where it stayed. It has never been really a dominant weapon. Yes, there are some people that have taken Redrix and has done magical things with it, but majority of people have not, because it is a high-impact pulse rifles. And in order to really get the most out of this pulse rifle, you're gonna want to have the 2 bursts, which of course will require you to land all crits. And nobody's got time for that, because you know, if you are a dedicated pulse rifle user, for the most part, you like things like bygones, maybe some blast furnace, maybe the new raid pulse rifle. All of those weapons have something in common: forgiveness and lack of crit necessity, which is why most people forget about high impact pulse rifles, because they require precision. Now, the Sandbox patch notes for 2.6.0.1 actually gave high impact pulse rifles a buff here, going from 32 per crit to now 33.6 and 20 per body to now 21. So not only did it get a bump there in its crit damage, but it also got a bump there in its body shot damage. Now that's going to make a big difference in its Tdk values, but the main thing to take away from it is Redrix is a little bit more forgiving. Not by much, but a little bit. Speaking of Tdk values, the time to kill value of something like Redrix Broadsword pre-Shadowkeep was actually 0.67 seconds. It's still the same. The difference now is the ability to actually 2 burst Guardians, even max resilience ones. And that increase in crit damage goes a long way, especially when you get outside of the damage fall off range and you start dealing less damage. Now, the damage fall off range for this Redrix right here, and I've got a number of different broadswords that you're seeing in today's gameplay, but I've kind of swapped back and forth between rolls that are like super stable to rolls that are more catered toward range to kind of see where we sit, right? Do we want to opt more for range, or do we want to opt more for stability? Now, first up, for this particular roll, this Redrix actually has 59 stability, but a whopping 86 range. We've got things like full bore, ricochet rounds, as well as a ranged masterwork, essentially giving us a damage fall off range of 42.5 meters. Now, if we were to take that same Redrix right here, but instead have a stability masterwork instead of a ranged masterwork, giving us a damage fall off range of approximately 40.5 to 41 meters. Now, is that really a big difference? Not really. I mean, it depends on you and your playstyle. Obviously, if you like to sit in the back of the map and lane, having everything loaded out in range is probably going to be the more preferred choice. The issue is at some point, you just got to give up on the pulse rifle and start rocking a scout rifle, which have actually made a comeback. And I would say anything outside of 40 meters, just throw on Polaris Lance or Jade Rabbit, or even the new scout rifle from Vex Offensive. So since the nerf here to hand cannon range, the optimal range for pulse rifles starts at about 25 meters and really tapers off about 45 meters. You can still get into gunfights at that range, but don't expect to reach any optimal TTK values unless, of course, you're rocking different archetypes of pulse rifles, which is why I think things like aggressive pulse rifles that can come with like really max range stats are such good ones, simply because they can go into those long ranges and still have solid damage pretty much throughout. Now, is Redrix Broadsword the weapon to use now? Is it the pulse rifle? I'm gonna be straight with you. I believe most pulse rifle users will probably not use Redrix. Like, if you're not already using Redrix pre-Shadowkeep, it's a good chance you're not gonna be using it in this sandbox. Most dedicated pulse rifle users are pretty much set in their ways. They either like aggressive pulse rifles, things like Blast Furnace, or even the new aggressive pulse rifle, Sacred Providence, or they're very much in love with either the new Vex Offensive pulse rifle, which is a 390 round per minute pulse, or just Bygone. It's hard to get a person who's been maining those pulse rifles to try either high impact pulses or even rapid fire pulse rifles. Now, surprisingly enough, the people that are probably going to use Redrix are definitely your more precision oriented folks. And I know that this is a pulse rifle, and immediately we write pulse rifles off as being like the dad weapon, right? Redrix doesn't necessarily have that same vibe. It requires you to land all crits. Like, even on a very base level, you can kill like a Guardian in 5 crits and 1 body that is 3 resilience or less. Could even be 2 resilience or less. But when you factor in things like damage fall off, you're gonna want to get used to always landing that 2 bursts, which kind of brings us back to where we were at the end of D1 in year 3. You see, back then we had a pulse rifle called Spare Change, and only a select few actually had a god roll of this weapon. For the most part, everyone was still rocking Clever Dragon, and if you weren't rocking Clever, you were still married up to something like Hawksaw or Blind Perdition. But in trials, every now and then, you would come across that one guy who was still married up to high impact pulse rifles, despite them being one of the most unforgiving archetypes in the game. And they would wreck you, instantly two burst you. And they didn't have things like Desperado on those pulse rifles back then. That was just the weapon by itself, its raw form, and they very much dominated with it. There will be players just like that in this sandbox. So back to our question, is Redrix going to be a dominant weapon? And the answer to that, not for everybody, but it has one of the highest skill ceilings. And if you can tame this weapon and master the two bursts, well then Desperado is just going to be cheese, man. And that's the thing about this pulse rifle. A lot of people get too hung up on the trait, and not that the trait isn't important. I mean, hell, Desperado brings our TTK value down from a base 0.67 to 0.47. It's dominant for sure. It's crazy how fast that rate of fire kicks up to with Redrix Broadsword, but you can never take advantage of that if you can't get precision kills. Again, that entire perk combination between Outlaw and Desperado is completely dependent on you landing those precision kills, which ultimately is you mastering the two bursts here. So guys, it won't be for everybody. I'm not gonna lie, it's difficult even in this sandbox, but it's a hell of a lot better than what it was before. It can reliably two bursts all the way up to like 43, 44 meters. It's effective against a lot of different weapons. My biggest complaint when it comes to Broadsword, I honestly hate the field of view that I get when I aim down sights with this weapon. The blinders that go up when you aim down sights on either side literally kills my field of view. I hate that about it, which is why I love weapons like Relentless. Even in this sandbox, and I know that's a static roll pulse rifle, it's still a good one. Doesn't have the range that Redrix has, but it still dominates up close. And on top of that, the clean field of view that you get when you aim down sights with this thing can't be matched. Now, a pulse rifle we're going to be looking at here pretty soon is the Premonition. This is the high impact pulse rifle present in the energy slot. You get it from Ares. It's got a number of different rolls on it that actually might give it a fighting chance in ranges outside of that 40-45 meters, as it can come with things like rangefinder. Now, I'm not even sure if it's dropping yet, but if it does drop for you and you got a god roll, feel free to come by on Discord, man. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.